Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Welcome to another edition of our Wednesday Q&A session. We are live on our Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis Facebook page, as well as our YouTube page, and on STL Imam Instagram. So alhamdulillah, I had quite a few questions that we have been given. We'll go over some of them today, inshallah. And if we have time, if anyone comments with any question, then we'll try to go over that as well. A lot of zakah-related questions. A lot of people, mashallah, they choose to give their zakah in the month of Ramadan because of the increased amount of hasanat, as we know, during this blessed month. So many people choose to give, whether their zakah due date is in the month of Ramadan or it's outside of Ramadan. People still choose to pay at least some of their zakah during this particular month so they can receive that hasanat. So that being said, inshallah, with regards to the first question, does zakah have to be given in monetary form to those who qualify, or can goods or food or assistance such as clothing or food or scholarships be organized and distributed to those who are zakah eligible? From my understanding of various zakah lectures, the zakah money is owned by the one who qualifies and therefore is allowed to freely do what he or she wills with it. Am I restricting their right by donating my zakah to specific organizations that provide Islamic scholarships or food to those who qualify? Now, the short answer to this is that it's not necessary to give money for your zakah. But I always tell people and I advise people that the best option to take is to always give in monetary form so that the recipient can be flexible in terms of what they need and what they choose to do with it. Allah knows best what they need. They may have debts. They may need certain things. And of course, money is that which buys certain items. However, that being said, if it is known that certain people need certain items, such as food or clothing or medicine, and so on and so forth, you are allowed to give in that particular form, and the goods themselves would be calculated with their market value. Now, that's because at times cash itself, they may be of no good to individuals who would have a hard time getting to certain places to use it, to a market or whatever. You look at, for example, we're not talking about here in the United States or in the UK or places like that where people can easily get to a market or they can easily get to a place to use their money for whatever they need. You go to impoverished nations and countries, areas where people are living in villages and so on. If you give them cash, a lot of times, what good is the cash going to do? How will they be able to get to certain areas and to use it for what they need? Instead, they need food, they need medicine, they need clothing, they need certain things like that. So a lot of times, for example, I've given to an orphanage before for zakah, and an orphanage, they use the money to the tailor makes new clothes for them to use and for their food and so on and so forth. So things like that, you can do that. But if you're giving locally to the people, it's always best to give something in monetary form so that they can use that for whatever their needs are. And even for scholarships, for example, a lot of madaris, madrasas, and schools, they accept zakah money to give to those who are the needy students, so that in turn, then they can use it out of their will. They use it to pay the tuition fee or anything like that. So that is something, and they can also, use some for pocket money or whatnot, but they use it for their tuition a lot of times. That is something which is also acceptable to do. Second question is from a sister. I am 2 years postmenopausal and recently began having very heavy bleeding this month. I have immediately reached out to my doctor and am undergoing testing to determine the cause of the bleeding. The bleeding has been so heavy over the last few days that it has been difficult to manage, and I want to confirm if I should continue praying and fasting while my test results await. So, well, first of all, I'd like to say Jazakallah khair to my sister-in-law at Tears for kind of helping me with this one a little bit with regards to the aspect of menopausal bleeding and the exact ruling when it comes to the fuqaha with regards to this. But the basic ruling that occurs when in this particular case is that the age of menopause, according to fuqaha, is the age of 55. And basically, the bleeding that a woman sees over the age of 55, if the bleeding is still extremely red or it's blackish in color, then it would be considered as hayd. It would be considered as the period, the menstrual cycle, just as it was beforehand. But if it's a green or brownish or yellowish color, then it would be considered istihada. And of course, in the case of istihada, one would continue to pray their salah and to fast and to do actions like that. If it's hayd, then of course one will not fast and one will not pray salah and whatnot. Now, this is unless, with regards to the green, brown, or yellowish color being istihada, this is unless, the exception to this is that if her normal habit before the age of menopause was that the flowing was of that particular color, then this would be regarded as her normal habit and it would be considered hayd. So it depends on what the previous habit was at that particular time. Okay, another question I received, and I received this question actually multiple times from people. What is the ruling about zakah when we have debts, long-term versus short-term? Right. So when you talk about debts, you have two types of debts that are there. You have a long-term debt and you have a short-term debt. A long-term debt is that which is a long-term debt is that which is over a year, according to the scholars. So a lot of times, people, if they have a house debt or if they have a car debt or whatever it may be, sometimes a student loan, whatever it is, a lot of times then you would pay that back in over a year's amount of time. Maybe it's a 10-year term or 5-year term, whatever it may be. So in the case of a long-term debt, you do not minus out, you do not deduct the entire debt's amount from when you're calculating your zakah. But there are two views on this. Our Darul Ifta gave the fatwa that you can minus out 1 year's worth amount of the debt, not the entire one. So, for example, if you're paying $1,000 or pounds a month for your house, whatever it may be, then you can deduct 12,000 from your calculating your zakah, but you cannot deduct the entire amount. The second view, which is a more cautious view, is that you could only deduct the amount that is currently due. So if you have whatever is due for your monthly payment, you could only deduct that 1 month's amount and not the entire year's amount. But alhamdulillah, there is leeway to make it easy for the people to deduct the entire year's amount if it is something which causes a lot of issue and difficulty for those to pay if they only deduct 1 month's amount. If one is able to pay more, then it's always good to take the cautious view, but it's not absolutely necessary to do that. And a short-term debt, going to the short-term debt is that which is in less than a year. So even if you owe $10,000 in less than a year, then you can deduct that entire amount. Whatever it is, you deduct the full amount of debt as long as it is being paid back in under a year's amount of time. Okay, next question. Is it riba or is it backbiting if you say something nice about someone behind their back? If it is something which is not negative and something which would not offend them, then in that case, no, it is not riba. If you're praising them or saying something nice about them or whatever, then it's not riba. But of course, we must always be careful to guard our tongues. Think before you speak, right? You may not intend to say something bad, but you may say something bad. And that is something which, of course, can be riba. So just be careful what we say, especially while we're in the state of at all times, but while we're in the state of fasting. Remember, the hadith says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for our fast if one continues to do actions like that. Which doesn't mean that the fast itself, the farad obligation, would be fulfilled, but the barakah and the blessing of the fast would be gone because of the aspect of continuation of sinning while one is fasting. Next question, another zakah question. My son is now 15 years old and is baligh. Does he need to give zakah on his savings this year or from the next year? So as soon as a person becomes baligh, and if they own the amount of nisab in their possession, that day will be their zakat day. So say, for example, the 1st of Ramadan, they turn 15 and they're baligh, right? So now the next year's Ramadan, which would be the 1st of Ramadan, would be the first time they would pay zakah as long as they maintain that amount. Even if it fluctuates back and forth, but as long as they don't completely lose their wealth, then the next year on the 1st of Ramadan, if they possess the amount of nisab, then they would pay zakah in the next year. Which brings me to another question. What happens in the case where a person's wealth fluctuates throughout the year? So there's three different scenarios here. The first one is that if a person has the amount of nisab, say on the first of Ramadan, and then during the middle of the year, their zakatable assets become absolutely zero. They go in the minus. They don't have anything. So now the zakat anniversary, which would be the next year's first of Ramadan, it would be canceled out completely. And the new zakat anniversary will be the date when the person next acquires wealth, which is equivalent to the nisab. Then the zakat will be given the following year on that particular lunar date from the time where they acquired the nisab. That's, of course, subject to the wealth not becoming nil or minused out once again. So that's one scenario. The second scenario is that if a person's zakatable assets reduce to less than the nisab during the year, but um, and they remain below the nisab on the anniversary of their zakat date, then the zakat anniversary, or actually, let me go over the second one first before I go over that one. If a person's zakatable assets reduce to less than the nisab during the year, but they do not become completely zero, and then when their zakat date comes, they have the nisab amount in their ownership, then they still must pay their zakat on their original due date. So that's the second thing, because their zakat their wealth didn't completely reduce to nil. The third case, which I was about to say, is that a person's zakatable assets, they reduce to less than the nisab during the year, and when the date of zakat arrives for them to pay, they still have less than the amount of nisab. So in that case, the zakat anniversary will no longer remain. And the zakat anniversary in this case only happens when they have to see at what point during the year they had the amount of nisab. And then 1 year after that, if they still own the nisab amount, then they would pay zakah. Now, I know all of this may sound a bit confusing. If anyone has any questions about this, if you are in that personal case, then send me a message, and inshallah, on a case-to-case basis, I will try to answer your question and help you with that. Next question, another zakah-related question. What is the aspect of zakah on pension funds or 401k? So I was asked this question by a sister in the UK about the aspect of pensions. And now I don't know exactly, since I'm based here in the States, I don't know exactly how it works in the UK, but I'm assuming it's kind of similar to how it works with the 401k, as many people have over here. Now, first of all, before saying that, a lot of times with 401ks or pensions, there's different things with that. If your employer is contributing from their side, then it would be considered a gift. And whatever they're investing in, you can keep that as a gift because it's coming from their side. If you're also contributing voluntarily from your side, whether it's into a pension fund or a 401k fund, then in that case, you have to be sure from your company where they are investing in, because they may be investing in haram companies. And if they're investing in haram companies, then when it comes time to take that money out, then you're definitely entitled to at least the amount that you had put in yourself. But anything extra, if it's haram companies that they're investing in, then one should be cautious with regards to that particular aspect. Now, with regards to zakah on these funds, there's different opinions with that. With the 401k here in the States, if one is to take that money out early before reaching a certain age, then in that case, you have to pay a heavy penalty. So many ulama give the fatwa and say that one must pay zakah on the amount that would be accessible to them right now. So you would minus out the penalty fee, and then you would pay zakah on that which is accessible to you currently. That's one fatwa. The second fatwa is that you pay zakah on the entire amount, no matter what it is. And the third fatwa is that you don't pay anything right now, and only when you receive it, if you live to be at that age, and if you receive everything, then you would pay zakah on every year that you missed. You would pay zakah on each year's amount. So you would keep track every year how much you have in that account, and then every year you would pay 2.5% of that when you receive everything in your possession. Now that's very hard to keep track of. This is why we always give fatwa. I always give fatwa usually for the first one, where you would only pay zakah on that which is accessible to you now. So that's that. And with pensions, I don't know if there's a penalty fee. If there is, then you can do the same thing. If there is not, then you would pay on the entire amount that is there. Next question. Can you use chapstick or lip balm when fasting? So the answer to this is that from a technical standpoint, moisturizers or chapsticks, lip balm, whatever it may be, they themselves do not break the fast because they're applied to the lips, which is outside the mouth. Now, remember, the fast is only broken if a substance reaches the throat. That being said, one has to be cautious and one should avoid, because the habit is usually when people put those things on, then they start licking their lips, and especially with the flavor and whatnot, it mixes with the saliva and all of that. Right? If the taste is not felt in the entire mouth, then in that case the fast would not break. But one should be very cautious and try to not apply these things, especially if one has the habit of licking the lips afterwards, because it would mix with the saliva. So just be very, very careful when it comes to that. Now, if there's a genuine need for one to use it because of skin issues or whatever, then in that case it's better. But just try still not to, kind of. If one like to, I guess, continuously be licking the lips if one has the habit of doing that. Okay, if a person has passed away and had sajdah to tilawah that he had not completed in their lifetime, is there any penalty that the family can pay for that? Now, we know sajdah to tilawah, which is, of course, the verses of sajdah in the Quran. When a person reads or recites these verses, then you make the sajdah. It is wajib. It is considered a wajib to make this sajdah. And it's also disliked. It's makruh for one to delay the sajdah to tilawah without any valid reason to do so. And if one did not fulfill this in their lifetime, there is no penalty per se for it. But rather, the family, according to fatwa from scholars, they say that the family can make istighfar on behalf of the person with regards to this. But if one has qadas to make up for their sajdah to tilawahs that they have missed, then try to do that as soon as you can. And it's very simple. You don't have to keep standing up and going down, standing up. You can go down for a sajdah and then sit and then go down for another one, and just keep repeating that process over and over again if one is estimating how many that they have missed. Okay, if a person looked at their watch while they are praying their salah, a person looked at their watch on their hand and understood the time during the salah, does the salah become invalidated? So the salah would not become invalidated. However, during salah, one should ensure that one maintains khushu' as much as possible. And the best khushu' is to keep their eyes focused on the place of sajdah. Looking around here and there is makruh and disliked in salah. And of course, if one completely turns their chest away from the direction of qibla, then in that case, the salah would be completely invalidated. But it is disliked for one to do that. But the salah would remain intact and valid. Okay, if a person has entered the masjid and salah has started, should they join the rows of the salah from the right or the left? And I think this is being asked because a lot of times we know about the hadith that talks about standing on the right side of the imam. Sometimes what happens is that the rows become lopsided. People are standing on the right side, but the left side is left completely empty. Now, first of all, it's sunnah for the imam to stand in the center of the rows for the salah. So therefore, the rows should be equally aligned on either side of the imam. Now, if a person has joined the imam in salah after the rows have been equally aligned on either side, then it's always better to go to the right side. But if the rows have not been equally aligned and the left side is left open, then go on the left side. A person, inshallah, will still, of course, get the great reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to the aspect of joining the congregation and joining the salah, joining the jama'ah. So that's what I have here today. Trying to see if there's any comments here. Okay, I have one question here. Please explain Qiyamul Layl as it relates to tarawih and tahajjud. So actually, last week when we did our Q&A, I answered this very question. I will, inshallah, mention it again. Now, again, Qiyamul Layl, just in a technical sense, Qiyamul Layl means standing in the night, having qiyam, standing in prayer in the nighttime. Now, when it comes to the aspect of tarawih versus tahajjud, both of them can be referred to as Qiyamul Layl because you are standing in prayer in both cases, right? And it's both being done during the nighttime. So tarawih itself is a salah which is, of course, unique to the month of Ramadan. There's no tarawih that is outside of Ramadan, whereas tahajjud is a salah that is done throughout the entire year. And we know in the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, when she said that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to offer salah at night in qiyam, in certain way, meaning 8 rakahs and then 11 rakahs, 8 rakahs of tahajjud and 3 witr in Ramadan as well as outside of Ramadan, which clearly explained that it was referring to tahajjud because tarawih is only done in Ramadan. So why would she say in Ramadan and outside of Ramadan when it's not being referred to as tahajjud? So tahajjud itself is a qiyam, which is done at nighttime. Tarawih is a salah which is also qiyam, but that is a salah that is unique to the month of Ramadan. So that is the basic difference between that. Ramadan Kareem to Brother Hassan, who has commented as well. So Jazakallah, Brother Aftab, for your question. Did the Prophet ﷺ have braids? Ibrahim Abbasi. Not that I am aware of. The Prophet ﷺ did, of course, there is the narration about the hair being lengthened, the yadi towards to the shoulder area, which is a sunnah in itself when it comes to what they call the zulf. So that is something which is mentioned. With regards to braids, I have not heard that. I don't think that is the case. That is a question from Brother Ibrahim on YouTube. So I don't see any other questions that are on any comments or anything like that. So we will end there today, inshallah. As always, if you have any questions, either send me an email, mufti@islamstl.org, or those on Instagram, you can send me a direct message, a DM, and inshallah, we will answer your questions there. And then we'll choose certain questions to also answer next week on Wednesday when we do our next Q&A. Jazakumullahu khairan. I ask you all to remember me in your du'as as well. We're approaching the last 10 nights. Please remember myself and my family and all of our brothers and sisters who are going through any difficulty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of them relief from their burdens. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to take full advantage of these last days of Ramadan. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.